Everyone to the regular meeting of the Planning Commission on Tuesday, May 3rd. We will go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Randy Hughes, and everybody could mute themselves. That'd be great.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Randy. Can we get a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Heath?
Present.
Commissioner Hughes?
Present.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Dennis, you're muted.
I don't even see Dennis on my screen.
Present.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Chairperson Van den Eyck?
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Carranza and Vice Chairperson Keene are excused absences for tonight. So we have 5 present.
Great, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I'll make the motion, please. I'll second.
Okay. Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Heath?
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yes.
Chairperson Van den Eyck?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. We'll now move into the public comment portion of the meeting, which is reserved for persons who would like to address the commission on any item that is not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and if you'd please state your name for the record before making your presentation. Are there any attendees online or on the phone that would like to make public comment on anything that we do not have on our agenda today? And if you do, if you could please raise your hand if you're on Zoom, and if you are on the phone, if you could do *9. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we will close that portion of the meeting, and we'll go ahead and move on to our consent calendar. Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Heath?
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes.
Chairperson Van den Eyck?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and move into the public hearing portion of the meeting. For each of the following items, the public will be given the opportunity to speak. After the staff report, the chair will open the public hearing and invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to make any comments. Members of the public will be invited to provide testimony to the commission following the applicant. Speakers should state their name for the record and can address the commission for 3 minutes. After all public comments have been received, the public hearing will be closed and the commission will discuss the item and take appropriate actions. Our first item on the agenda is conditional use permit for 2300 Ramona Road for Woodwoods Humane Society. And we'll go ahead and ask for any disclosure of ex parte communications. We'll start with Greg.
Yes, I actually did go down and meet with a couple representatives from Woods last week and got a tour of their facility just to see how they were handling their canine situation down in San Luis.
Okay. Dennis.
No ex parte.
Jason.
No ex parte.
Okay, Randy.
No ex parte.
Okay. And as for myself, I also went down a few months ago after the DRC saw this item. I went to the Woods Humane Society in San Luis Obispo and had a tour of the facility down there and met with a couple of representatives. But that is it. So why don't we go ahead and move into our staff presentation. Mariah, do you have that today?
That is myself. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yes, this is a conditional use permit for 2300 Ramona Road for the Woods Humane Society expansion. Here's an aerial view of the property. You can see there's a couple buildings on the property right now. It's right along Ramona Road and it backs up to residential neighborhood, otherwise known as Apple Valley. To the north, there is a church property, and then to the south, there's a vacant lot currently. So in looking at the zoning, this property is zoned public. It's a little under 2 acres, 1.88 acres. To the north and south are also publicly zoned properties. And then to the west, there's a single family residential property. So a little bit of background about the project. In 1997, a conditional use permit was approved to establish the animal shelter for North County Humane Society. In 2002, this conditional use permit was amended to allow the addition of a 2,160 square foot modular building. This condition included prohibiting dogs from being sheltered at the facility. In 2017, the conditional use permit was again amended to include the spay and neuter clinic. At the time, this was considered to be an animal hospital use, which is allowed with a conditional use permit here. This project was brought before the Design Review Committee originally in September 2020 to look at the different land use categories. And in September 2020, the Design Review Committee agreed that this use is more consistent with an animal hospital definition, and therefore it should be considered as a conditionally allowed use in the public zone, and we'll go over those definitions in just a bit. So after the Design Review Committee told the applicants to proceed with the conditional use permit in 2020, the applicant continued to work on the project, made some modifications based on the initial comments, and brought it back before the Design Review Committee in November of 2021. At this meeting, the Design Review Committee discussed the site design, architecture, and landscaping on the site. The Design Review Committee agreed with this site layout and the as it was proposed, and recommended that the applicant obtain a noise study prior to the Planning Commission. There were some comments brought up from the neighbors about noise concerns, and the Design Review Committee, again, they told them they should probably get a noise study, which they did. The facilities that are existing on the property today, there's a 1,300 square foot animal intake facility, 2,300 square foot spay and neuter clinic, 2,100 square foot cat shelter, and a 600 square foot storage facility. And again, the previous conditional use permit was limited just to cats, no dogs being cared for on site. And there are currently 24 parking spaces. So the project being proposed today is to preserve that spay and neuter clinic on site, and then to develop a new over 15,000 square foot facility that would contain indoor animal facilities. This would include the addition of dogs on site, as well as keeping the cat facilities or adding them to the new building, but keeping those services, adding administrative offices, as well as a classroom that I believe they're using for kind of community events and classes. The project also includes 2 fenced outdoor dog exercise yards, and they're relocating the parking to the front of the property facing Ramona and then right along the north property line. So they're going to have a total of 37 parking spaces in the end based on the site plan. So going back to the land use conversation that was originally brought up before the Design Review Committee, this use seems to fall between 2 land uses, which is one of the questions that we had brought before the DRC to kind of determine how the applicant should proceed. So the first one is a kennel definition. So this is a lot, building, structure, enclosure, or premise where 4 or more dogs or cats over 4 months of age are kept or maintained, including the keeping of such animals for sale, for commercial breeding, or for lodging and care. This doesn't include dogs and cats kept for non-commercial purposes. And kennels are not allowed in the public zone, not even with a conditional use permit. Animal hospitals, on the other hand, are allowed with approval of a conditional use permit. And the definition of this is establishments primarily engaged in performing services for animals, including veterinary services and animal hospitals. This does not include kennels, which are, again, that first definition. So based on the proposed use for Woods Humane Society, they were sort of encouraged to proceed with the animal hospital definition, or that was found to be more consistent with their actual operations there. So moving on to the architectural design of the project, it's similar to the facility that they have in San Luis right now, with various roof forms, pretty neutral colors, a little bit of a modern architectural style. The materials and colors used, there'll be some metal wall panels, a stucco wainscoting, stucco columns, asphalt shingle roof. So you can see on these 3D renderings, the roof forms in the front. It adds a little bit more dimension having that front portion with the sign. There are some kind of little courtyard areas you can see in the front there. This gives you a little bit of a better idea of the outdoor exercise facility in the middle there. And moving on to the elevation. So these are what you'll see. This top one is from Ramona Road. It is set pretty far back from Ramona Road, so you probably wouldn't really be able to see it unless you're really looking for it, but that's the side facing Ramona Road. And then this back side is what would be facing Apple Valley, but there is some pretty substantial fencing, which we'll go over. And then this top picture here is what would be seen from the adjacent church property. And then the bottom one is what would be seen from the vacant lot to the south. So this has a lot of notes about the sewer connection, which has been discussed thoroughly with our Public Works Department. So you don't necessarily need to read those on the site plan, but this gives you an idea on an aerial shot of what the project will look like in terms of scale and location. And we have the setbacks outlined in a few slides. So again, just outlining some of the important parts of the site plan. They have the first outdoor exercise yard right here along Ramona Road. This is the existing spay and neuter facility that they'll be keeping. This is their new proposed building. And then again, that second outdoor exercise yard. So here's a floor plan of what Woods is proposing. So they have some different services, areas where dogs who are sick would be quarantined, multiple dog facilities. They're relocating their cat facilities to this building since the other one's getting demolished. So they have various rooms for the different services they provide. And then this room up here would be the classroom. This is sort of a middle room for people who are wanting to adopt, kind of an initial meet and greet area. And then this is their outdoor exercise yard for prospective adopters to meet their dogs, as well as give the dogs some exercise, which we'll talk about. So going back to parking, right now, there are only 24 parking spaces required under the original use permit. The applicant is proposing 37 parking spaces. Per our municipal code, they're required to have at least 35. So they are compliant with our municipal code standards for parking. So moving on to noise, this was one of the main concerns that was brought up from the neighbors during the design review committee, and something that the design review committee sort of urged the applicant to provide more information on before proceeding to planning commission. So the concern is about the addition of dogs and dogs barking and how that would affect the nearby residential neighborhood, Apple Valley. So Woods outlined a little bit or a few details about their operation here in terms of noise. So a couple things to note: dogs are only allowed out in exterior yards from 9 to 5 daily, from 9 to noon. I believe those are their exercise times. And then from noon to 5, those are times where prospective adopters would be able to come and meet their dogs in those outdoor areas. Something that they did emphasize was that dogs are never allowed outside without a person, basically. That's for the dog's safety, for the people's safety, and then it will also help to mitigate that noise because if a dog is barking, they'll be able to immediately be there and control them. So that's how Woods described their operation. Again, the staff and the volunteers are always present. And then they did proceed with getting an environmental noise impact report, which was prepared by Soundpost Acoustics, which is actually based out of Colorado. I attached the full noise report to the back of the staff report, which is pretty comprehensive. I just wanted to make a table to make it a little bit more digestible, but essentially the noise study was based on a similar facility in Colorado. They found that the average noise levels based on the situation in Colorado that was based on 2 different locations, 75 and 61 dBA, and then the maximum noise levels reached 84 and 70. But based on Woods facility, the change in elevation, the location of the building, the average noise level at the western property line, that's the property line abutting Apple Valley, was estimated to be 51 dBA with a maximum noise level of 60 dBA. Another noise source that was identified was trash collection. This was identified as 65 dBA for the average noise level. Our municipal code does allow an exception for trash collection to be a little bit louder based on the nature of it. So based on the code, it's 75 to 80 dBA. The rooftop mechanical equipment is 43 dBA, and then the nearby Highway 101 is 50 to 55 dBA currently. So in looking at the noise level standards in our municipal code, Woods is estimated to be pretty close to those established noise levels. Even the estimated noise level with dogs barking, that 51 dBA, that would be when multiple dogs are outside and barking at the same time. That's what that's based off of. So that's not necessarily all the time. It's just when multiple dogs would be outside if they were barking. So in order to help mitigate these noise situations, staff has added a couple conditions. The first one is that limited hours are to be used for exterior yards from 9 to 5 daily, and that staff must be present with the dogs outside at all times. No dog shall be left unattended in these outdoor exercise yards. Again, the noise levels must be adhered to per our municipal code. And then one thing that the noise study recommended was that a 6-foot CMU wall be installed around the dumpster pad prior to finaling the building permit. So this would help mitigate the noise from the trash collection. So those have been added as conditions. And sometimes I think it's a little bit hard to grasp exactly what these different numbers mean. So I just wanted to add a chart to sort of help you gauge to understand, you know, what 40, 50, 60, 70 dBA actually means. So around 50 is what you'd expect a dishwasher in the next room to be, or quiet urban daytime, which is applicable here. Between 50 and 60, a large business office, getting louder, normal speech, vacuum cleaner. So, you know, and then you can see as it gets louder, the progression of these noise sources. So here are a couple sections of the property. So as I'd mentioned, there is a pretty significant difference in elevations from the subject property to the residences below, which also has been identified to help with mitigating the noise, which I think you can see a little bit better here. It's a little bit blurry, but essentially you can see the noise source would be from the courtyard. That's what's been identified, you know, where the barking dogs may be. It looks like it, the building helps to block that noise, and then the noise because of the building and noise sort of travels upward, and so it would be mitigated by the building as well as the topography on the site. And here are just some, here's a site plan zooming into some of those things that help mitigate the noise sources. So you can see the building is there. This is the location of that 6-foot CMU wall. And then there's a significant slope downwards to the residential area next door. So moving on to the setbacks, the municipal code, again, doesn't specifically call out animal shelters, but it does call out certain facilities that are consistent with animal shelters. So the municipal code requires a minimum setback for outside animal enclosures that are part of the kennel to be located a minimum of 25 feet from the property line. The municipal code also requires a 100-foot setback for animal husbandry facilities that board large animals, and a 25-foot setback for any outside animal areas used for short-term activities on property lines adjacent to residential uses. So here I've laid out the different setbacks to property lines. The facility itself is about 140 feet from Ramona Road. It's about 45 feet from the nearby church property. The outdoor exercise yard is about 225 feet to the nearest residence there in Apple Valley. The edge of the building is about 150 feet from that nearest residence. The building itself is about a little over 100 feet from the property line, and then it would be 14 feet from this vacant lot to the south. So moving on to landscaping, screening, and fencing. So to go over the different kinds of fences that they have on site, and I just have a little picture of the examples below here, but all along the front, that blue line you see is a 6-foot decorative metal fence. So if you look on the bottom there, that's the fence that that dog would be running in front of. That's the fence type. So a little bit more of a decorative, but still providing the security for the facility. The green line there is a 6-foot tall solid vinyl fence. So that's that third picture you see at the bottom there. That will also help to mitigate some of the noise as it provides an additional noise barrier. The red line that you see is a 6-foot tall vinyl coated chain link fence. And that's what you see at in the middle there on the bottom. Our municipal code requires all vinyl coated chain link fences to be screened with evergreen vegetation. So if the applicant does indeed wish to continue the vinyl chain link fence down the bottom of the property line where it's shown there, they will need to provide more additional evergreen screening there. And then along Apple Valley, along the residence there is an existing 6-foot wood fence, and then there's some vegetation along that already, so that won't be changing. There's also landscaping shown throughout the site, various trees throughout the parking lot. Again, they have sort of a little courtyard area here, some seating areas out here, with various trees and drought tolerant vegetation here. So some of the conditions that staff has added specifically regarding the fencing are that vinyl coated chain link fencing shall be a neutral color and be fully screened with evergreen vegetation per our municipal code standards. And then that solid vinyl fencing be a neutral gray or tan color, so it's not a stark white and really sticks out from the rest of the development. So here's some photos of the site today. You can see that Ramona Road is pretty much all lined with these existing trees. So they don't necessarily need to plant any street trees along Ramona Road because it is fully lined right now. That also makes the building less visible from Ramona Road. Like I said, it's almost not visible unless you're looking directly at it because of the trees and vegetation in front there. And then this bottom picture is once you're on the driveway and looking onto the site, that building to the right there is that modular unit that they're using for their spay and neuter facilities that would remain. Top picture is just a little bit of a better picture of those facilities. This bottom picture is the existing cat shelter facility that will be going away with this development. This top picture is the view overlooking Apple Valley, so you can see a little bit of the change in elevation there. And then that chain link fence will be replaced with that 6 foot tall solid fence, which you can see a little clearer in that bottom picture there. And then I just wanted to show a picture of what would be visible from the road within Apple Valley. So since the project is sitting higher up, it will be somewhat visible, but since it's so far from the property line, they'll probably most likely see that 6 foot tall vinyl fence more than the building itself. So staff has added conditions of approval. Most of them I've mentioned throughout the presentation, but I just wanted to note this one at the end that we have added previously to projects with some neighborhood concern to hopefully provide a little bit more security for the neighbors. So this last condition is that the use permit shall be subject to additional review upon receipt of noise or operational complaints. Additional mitigation may be warranted upon verification of recurring noise or operational disturbances that impact residential properties. So if there are issues that are consistently coming up with the development, this would allow us to revisit Woods and further mitigate whatever issues might be happening. So the project qualifies for a Class 32 categorical exemption from CEQA for construction of an infill development. I just wanted to outline the findings that the Planning Commission needs to make tonight in order to approve this project. If the Planning Commission is not able to make even one of these findings, then it wouldn't be able to be approved. And so the two that I think are especially pertinent in this discussion are number 3 and 4. Number 3 is that the establishment and subsequent operation or conduct of the use will not, because of the circumstances and conditions applied in this particular case, be detrimental to the health, safety, or welfare of the general public or persons residing or working in the neighborhood of the use, or be detrimental or injurious to property or improvements in the vicinity of the use. And then number 4, that the proposed project or use will not be inconsistent with the character of the immediate neighborhood or contrary to its orderly development. So I just wanted to highlight those two specifically that I think are relevant to the discussion. As always, if the Planning Commission does not want to approve the conditions as is, the Planning Commission can include modifications to the project or conditions of approval. The Planning Commission can determine that more information is needed and refer the item back to staff, or the applicant can deny the project and clarify the reasons for denying the project. And staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Mariah. Any questions from? Yes, Dennis. You have to unmute yourself.
And thank you. You know, noise is a interesting critter in the sense that a lot of the noises that are being studied are ambient noise. It's like the drone of a plane or the sound of the freeway, traffic on the freeway, where a dog barking is, you know, that type of sound. It's not a continual sound. And sometimes those sharp sounds are louder than the ambient sounds that are being studied. I'm going to start with, where was the trash enclosure located, please?
Yes, so let me go ahead and go back. I don't think it shows it on those site plans.
Was that it right there? On
It shows the wall, but I think there's a better.
Is it up in the top?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to see. I should have outlined it, but it's right here. These are the facilities, and then the wall would be along the whole top of the driveway here.
Has along with this, the wall and the enclosure, and then on this landscape plan, there was a note for additional evergreen screening in that far northwest corner. Did Public Works make any comment about putting landscaping on top of the sewer easement, or putting the wall within the sewer easement? And for whatever reason, if they have to tear it down, I mean, they have to break through it to do work. Did they express any concerns?
No, they did not. I'm not sure actually if we talked to them about the wall. That's a good point. I think Kelly can get our Public Works Director on, and maybe we can have him weigh in on that. And maybe they can shorten the wall and keep it out of the way of that sewer.
The landscaping, I mean, roots love water and moisture, and so they'll find their way into things. Are there any, in the design of the building itself, are there along, let's say along the wall that's facing the residential area, are there any noise mitigations built into that wall? For instance, like, where's the facing Apple Valley? So it looks like there's a couple doors. There's no windows along that side, or those dark areas, windows that are shown on there?
Yeah, so I believe those are windows. I'm trying to look at the floor plan to see exactly what's on the other side of those. I think that the applicant will be able to expand. I know they have, yeah, so I know they have a lot of sort of built-in noise mitigations, the way that the building is built, and it was all very intentional. So I would encourage them to expand more, but I can take a look at the floor plan and see exactly. I believe those are small windows, but they might not be into where the dogs are actually being kept. I think that came up out of the design review committee. But.
Okay. The mitigations that you have on number 2, the conditions from previous conditional use permit projects not specifically amended remain valid. Do we know what those are specifically, or how many have been excluded from the previous documents and how many carry over?
I don't have those specifically. I think this is a pretty different project than what was previously approved. So the ones that will carry over are not super significant because this is a different operation. So I think there were probably some about, landscaping the frontage and some different things, but since this is such a different project, these will pretty much change all of the previous conditions of approval.
Okay. The new condition that you added, number 17, I appreciate that. how is that to operate? I mean, if the nearest neighbor has a complaint, is there a percentage or a number of complaints that's going to trigger a relook at the mitigations and how well they're working? Or is there, I mean, how is that going to operate so the neighbors understand about how they make complaints? Is it like a code enforcement action where they would call and the city and say that we're concerned about noise? This is what we've heard, and they get the code enforcement officer out, or how does
That's
that
something we
work?
can talk about further with the commission as we deliberate and see where we're going to go on that. And there's several different ways that can occur. It can occur through code enforcement, but we like to, with a conditional use permit, we have to ensure that they're always in compliance and that they're always meeting the findings, so that, you know, if conditions change out here without us knowing, or if something changes, we like to be informed, and we'll have to go investigate and take a look and see if there's new mitigations necessary. I think that's the thought behind that. But
I'm just
that's-
interested in them knowing and
Yeah.
how
Typically,
how
we
it
would be-
operates.
Yeah, we'd be waiting for somebody from the neighborhood to notify us of an issue. We, as a planning team, would go out and investigate that on a CUP. It probably wouldn't be a code enforcement.
And would that be one complaint would trigger you to go out there and look, or to have?
Sure, we wouldn't
number
have to
of
wait for
complaints?
multiple. It would be one complaint would trigger us evaluating whether they're in compliance with their conditions, whether they're meeting the standards that were set forth in the noise evaluation, and whether their mitigation is still in place, such as their walls and their building design, or has something changed in their operation or their building design to make things differently. Or, for example, are things not working that they intended to have work?
Mhm.
Gives us a chance to take a look at those issues. But if someone just complains because they want to complain, it might not be valid. I mean, there has to be a true issue about something that's gone on. It's not going to, every complaint's not going to trigger an automatic review of the use permit. We're going to have to verify that there's truly a topic that's not in compliance.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we do
there
this all the time. In fact, there's multiple businesses in Atascadero where we're having to do what we call compliance monitoring or condition monitoring over time.
Yeah, I just want them to understand. There were 3 letters that were written that I saw. All 3 actually acknowledge that Woods is a very helpful facility for what they do, but they all express concerns, obviously, about the noise. And so, and each of them also had mentioned that there be additional mitigations or something added to try to provide more protection to the residential area. And I see number 17 as being very helpful in doing in that. I just want to make sure that they understand that they have this avenue, and that if there are valid concerns, that they use it and don't be afraid to use it. That's all.
We rely on the community to help us with condition compliance, and we strongly encourage folks to reach out to us in any situation, because we can't be out there as a team all the time looking at everything. So
any of the other commissioners have questions for staff? Jason?
Well, I understand that noise compliance can be tricky because of what Dennis was saying about how noise travels and the type of noise that's being triggered. Dog barking is throughout the city a noise issue. You know, you get noise complaints all the time. You know, dog down the street just barks all night long. And considering this facility is going to house dogs, it went from no dogs in a conditional use permit to now having no dogs overnight to being allowing for expanded facilities for dogs. It just seems that they've done everything they can to mitigate the sound of dogs traveling in this building. What I worry about is the nearby neighbors, you know, maybe sitting out on the porch on a Saturday afternoon, enjoying, our beautiful weather, that's during operating hours. Is there a way that we could mitigate any noise, like have a quiet days or something like that? Because I know inside the facility, there's probably gonna be very little noise that travels out. Am I correct on that?
Yes, so yeah, the applicant can definitely expand on all of the noise mitigation in the building, but yes, there will be built-in, it's designed to hold sound in the building.
Yeah, I really have seen these facilities before, and they're very good at trapping sound, so you probably could live right next door to one and not really hear any noise. And there seems to be enough space, but what I'm worried about is there going to be any relief from outdoor noise, like I said, quiet days? Could we put some sort of condition that so that guy can maybe make a plan to say, okay, I don't have to worry about dogs barking on this day or something like that, just to kind of mitigate any outside noise, or if they've already done that. Maybe that's best for the applicant.
Yeah, that's something that the commission could certainly condition, but yeah, it might be good to listen to the applicant and what their proposed model is beyond what I explained. Okay,
I just want to make sure that we're not trying to have to pull something back after it's approved. That's always more difficult. Okay, thank you.
Greg or Randy, do you have any questions? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and open the public hearing portion, and we'll invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to address us.
Can anyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I don't suppose there's any prizes for guessing who I am, I guess, after the times we've had conversations before. But I'm Neil Trent, the CEO of Woodwoods Humane Society, and thank you so much for allowing us to present at the Planning Commission. I have the easy job today, which is to hand all of this over to our wonderful architectural firm, Animal Arts, who have all the answers. So I think on our Zoom call at the moment, we have Heather Lewis, who is the senior partner at Animal Arts architectural company in Colorado. Wendy Berman, who is with Animal Arts and has been instrumental in a lot of the planning and preparation of these designs. And we also have present on the Zoom a number of board members, but specifically Gregor Jones, who is a member at large on the board of directors. And I think many of you may be familiar with that name. He's well known in Atascadero. So if I could hand it over to Heather first, with your permission, and see if we can move forward.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I'm Heather Lewis. I'm a senior principal with Animal Arts architectural firm out of Boulder, Colorado. We work around the nation and actually around the world. We are the most well-known animal architecture firm for this kind of facility in the United States, and we also work in Canada and overseas. We do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of facilities, but the most important thing is that we pride ourselves in making sure that we address community concerns and that these buildings are community friendly. We push the envelope as much as we possibly can when it comes to reducing fear, anxiety, and stress for pets. And that's good for communities because it means healthy, happy animals. So I will address specifically some of the questions that arose, and then I'm going to hand it over to Wendy Berman, who is a senior architect with our firm and very, very qualified to answer detailed questions. So in regard to the big picture questions, I will assure you, I'll put my reputation on the line and say that noises are not going to come through the building walls. And here is why. The first, when I talked about reducing fear, anxiety, and stress, I really live by that. I truly believe in it. And that means that the animals that are in this building will be housed in the most humane way. And so in any, the room with the most number of dogs has 8 in it. And so what we're doing is we're reducing the social stressors that cause dogs to bark, and then mitigating any barking noise with isolation walls that screen 50 decibels through them. And so that's just the dog enclosure itself. And then we have multiple layers between the dog enclosure and the exterior of the building. So that backside of the building you were looking at is actually the utility spaces, such as laundry, food prep, and we put those as a buffer between Apple Valley and where the dogs are housed. So that's just kind of, I feel very confident that the building will screen the noise. So that's one fear that we can, I think, mitigate. The other thing is I want to clarify the number of dogs we're talking about. There are industry standards that apply to animal shelters, and they're non-negotiable, especially in the state of California. California has the strictest animal welfare laws of any state in our great nation. And we must house the dogs in proper humane housing in the state of California. That means 2 compartments. So when you're looking at the floor plan and you see these pods, each dog gets 2 compartments. They get a living compartment and a resting compartment, and that is humane housing. So when you look at the floor plan, you see a lot of compartments, but it adds up to 28 possible canines in this building. And then of those 28 possible canines, 24 are for animals that are not sick. There are 4 that are for potential sick housing. Those will not be used unless there is a reason to move an animal from healthy housing into that housing. So in other words, they're not double booked. So if an animal gets sick, they go to isolation. Same as a human hospital. And then 4 of the remaining 24 are quarantine. Those are required housing units for any either health or behavioral quarantine or other kinds of quarantine activities. So long story short, 20 is the maximum number of dogs that would occupy this facility regularly. And just as we're very familiar with maximum capacity during the pandemic in a hospital, this is a healthcare facility. So we would not expect Woods to operate at max at all times. So we're really talking about a lower number of dogs that I think maybe some people are concerned about. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then in regard to those best practices for housing those animals, operationally, the animals would be 1 or 2 outside at a time. When we are dealing with animal shelters today, we're talking about healthcare facilities, and I've said that before. So the easy to adopt animals have already been adopted. And we're talking about animals that maybe need some healthcare, maybe they're elderly or something like that. So the outside situation is not a free-for-all. It's a staff member with an animal that might need some help walking around or getting some enrichment or play or something like that. So it's definitely not like a kennel. So I hope that helps quite a bit. We care a lot about the well-being of the animals, and therefore have built that into the design, and are excited to answer any detailed questions. And Wendy is better at that than I.
Thank you, Heather.
Yes, so I am Wendy, a senior project architect at Animal Arts. And if you have any questions, I think Heather actually covered the points that I was going to cover. One item that is sort of a nuance, but it does contribute, is that all of these exterior play yards have planting around them, and it's something that is desired so that if there is a person walking on a sidewalk that might interest the dog, come see me, or the dog would be curious, that buffer of landscape protects between the area where the dog may be, and then somebody walking on a sidewalk. The other thing is that in that central courtyard space, that the area to the north is staff only. So staff and volunteers only. So the public is really not near where the dogs would be outside, except in that very inner sanctum that was called the meet and greet. So it's further distanced. The area that is near the front of Ramona, that is a larger area, and that I think would be the area where you would have staff taking a dog out for exercise. So if there are any questions, yes, the kind of open area that you're seeing in the roof, that is the mechanical well. So all of the mechanical units would be on the roof and they would be screened, so not visible from the surrounding areas.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Do we have any questions from the planning commissioners of our representatives? Start with Jason.
Oh, okay, so that clears up a lot. Thank you, Wendy and Heather. You guys have looked like you've done an excellent job on designing this in great respect of the surrounding neighborhood. I just wanted to clarify that, you know, at any given time, you're not going to have, you know, a dozen dogs out running around barking. It's like onesies, twosies. There's going to be therapy. You might have a little bit of barking here and there, but nothing more than a neighborhood with people walking their dogs, stuff like that, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Wonderful. That's all.
All right, Randy.
All right, I know you mentioned that in this situation, as far as for housing canines, most likely would be a lot more ones that were elderly or possible like healthcare. Is there anything that makes it to where that's directed where that's more what this facility is for, or is that just kind of what is common with the situation? I was just wondering if this is being viewed more as a medical than what your one in San Luis is, or if that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles normally.
Certainly, Neil may correct me if I'm say anything different than how they would operate it. So Neil may jump in. But what we're seeing in animal welfare, particularly recently and particularly post-pandemic, is that the animals that are able to be out of the shelter, because remember the last couple of years we had to close a lot of facilities, including shelters. A lot of the animals that can be out of the shelter are in homes, or they're in foster homes. And that is a better model for adopting dogs, we've now learned. And so we know that dogs don't do well in shelters, and neither do cats, but particularly dogs kind of behaviorally decompensate in shelters and get stressed out. So we want them out of the shelter and in homes. So if you think about the evolution of how children's homeless children have started in orphanages, which was a terrible model for their well-being, and then have moved to foster care models. That is similar in terms of the evolution that we're having here. So what we find is that the animals that are in the shelter, we call it last resort, not pet resort. So the animals that are in the shelter because there isn't another option for that animal right at the moment, which may mean that that animal needs more attention from staff. And oftentimes that's healthcare related. Many pets come in with poor teeth, for example, and need dental care and need rehabilitation on dental care. And so that's why I think this facility is well characterized as a healthcare facility, and that obviously there will be adoptable pets here. There will be pets without needs, but the trend is towards pets with more needs.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it seems like the business model has kind of changed. Because when you mentioned that, my concern was, I mean, you have one facility that was in slow, and then you have this one that was built. And then mentioning that, I was like, oh, is this potentially going to be a doggy sanitarium. But it appears that this is more of a response as far as that's. I thank you for informing me on that, by the way, that the foster system is kind of more of how you guys are adapting. And from what I can tell, I mean, it looks like Jason already addressed the question where it's only going to be like 1 or 2 potentially outside that are getting their exercise or whatnot. So that kind of clears up 90% of where my concerns were. So thank you.
Yes, and I guess the last thing I'll add to that is the best practice for animal shelters is shortening what we call, sorry, that's my dog barking, ironically, shortening the length of stay as much as possible within the shelter system. So one thing you should know is that we're also not encouraging dogs to be there for 6 months or something. Like 2 weeks is a typical best practice for maximum length of stay in shelter. So again, this is a healthcare facility for interventions and adoptions and moving the dog to rescue or foster. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Any other questions of our applicant representatives from Greg?
One question I had is, you had touched on the closure of other shelters and other facilities. Are animals going to be brought in to this facility for their initial intake, or are they going into San Luis and then determining from there whether or not they go up to Atascadero?
Shall I jump in on that, Heather?
Yes, please, Neil. Thank you.
Great question, Greg. Still, San Luis is going to be our main facility. That's where we've got much more resources to provide interventions, the initial triaging for animals that come into us. I suspect that the way this will end up is that the dogs that will possibly be moved to Atascadero are the animals that have already undergone some initial intervention and are probably just, if you like, being finished, so to speak, so that they're readily available for adoption up at the Atascadero facility. So Atascadero will always be a satellite operation to what we have at San Luis Obispo. And of course, the other question that probably needs to be addressed is that the focus is also to provide better facilities for the cats. That seems to somehow, in all the conversations that I've been part of, seems to have been missed. But the facility we have for the cats up there at the moment was built many, many years ago, and best practices have changed drastically. And so the focus is also to upgrade and provide state-of-the-art facilities for cats up at the Atascadero as well. So that's also, the dogs, of course, are attracting a lot of interest and attention, but it is the cats also that have some challenging times. And I don't think I need to mention to anybody who lives in Atascadero or north of the Grade that we have issues with cat populations in the area.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Great. Jason.
I just have a final question. Considering how, if you were to break ground soon, when are you expected to finish this project?
So we understand that there is a timeline related to the planning approval, and we have that in mind. We also recognize that there will need to be fundraising for this project, and there is currently fundraising being undergone by Woods Humane Society, although we have held off on really going after that because of wanting to ensure that there's this development as possible. I'm hedging because it takes a while to do these projects, to be honest, somewhere between 3 to 5 years. and hopefully closer to 3, but just so everybody understands, this is not breaking ground tomorrow. And there may be a need to extend or relook at this should that timeline go beyond the approval timeline.
Oh, I mainly was asking the amount of time that construction would be taking place. It wouldn't be done in phases as you raise
yes.
money. You'd raise the money, have the project approved, and then complete the project in, 6 months or.
Yes, animal shelters do take a little bit longer to build than most projects
Okay.
because they are the kitchen and bath of your house. And, Wendy, please jump in if you feel differently, but I believe this would be a minimum 10-month project, probably 12 months by the time you install the equipment inside and commission it. Most contractors want to get a roof on the building. We call that drying in. So that would happen faster, but there's going to be a lot of activity within the building. Wendy, you have any comments on that?
Yes, and the sanitary sewer piece of the project, which is proposed along that northern property line extending down into Apple Valley. That would be, of course, the very first piece. And the wonderful thing about that is that it, you are upgrading all of the sanitary sewer facilities along, well, certainly here and then potentially along Ramona, so that you do not have any more septic fields. It's all becomes part of an underground system.
Okay. My main concern was that foundation and exterior building noises would extend for a long period of time, but once those walls are up, interior stuff doesn't tend to really bother the neighbors as much as backhoes. So if, I just wanted to, I had a project across the street from my house that seemed to take forever. It was a public project.
Commissioner Anderson, may I make a comment regarding that?
Absolutely, yes.
So we have the benefit and maybe the challenge of having cats on our site. And if you have a cat and you make noise around a cat, you may have a scratched face or a scratched arm. And that's actually a really serious concern for operations for Woods Humane Society. So the benefit of knowing that we're going to be working with an occupied building is that we're going to be very, very motivated to reduce the noise that is happening on the project site. And we do have means and methods for that. Obviously, architects aren't responsible for means and methods, but we can write into our specs and negotiate with our contractors the need for noise mitigation during construction. So for example, we worked on a recent occupied facility in Denver, and we used in lieu of any sort of percussive demolition techniques, they used a different type of technique that did not have any percussive noise associated with it. So it's certainly something that we can talk about as a desired goal for the construction, and it would be a shared goal by Woods Humane Society to reduce percussive noise, backup alarms on equipment, and other things that may be really disturbing both to the residents of Apple Valley, but also to our cat friends who are going to be in that building while we're constructing.
Yes, it definitely sounds like you've got skin in the game. You don't want to get scratched. Okay, thank you very much. That helped a lot.
Any other commissioner questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. We're gonna go ahead and open up for public comment. Each person will have 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record, and after all the comments, we will discuss things. So please don't ask us to answer questions right now, but we'll discuss them after you've made your comments. So we'll go ahead and move to our first commenter. It looks like Barbara Warren has her hand up.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you could get closer to your mic,
I'll turn the volume up.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yes. Thanks.
Okay. So, first of all, I think that adding dogs to this location so close to a residential area is not a good idea. I would like to know how many of you would like to live in one of those houses at the bottom of that hill next to the proposed facility. That's one thought for you. The other thing, a couple things that I would like to know are, if more than 2 dogs are out in the yard at a time, is that going to be considered a violation of the conditional use permit? Is that something that is just kind of a desired thing that would really be nice, but if it doesn't work out, oh well. And it seems like Woods is desiring this place to be kind of a hospital area, but can that change? And could we end up with just kenneling dogs there rather than rehabbing dogs there? Is there anything in place that says what they can and cannot do in writing rather than this is what we desire to do, this is kind of what we want, but if things change, oh well. So I see a lot of kind of pie in the sky. Isn't this nice? We'd like to do this. This is what we think we'll be doing. But there's nothing concrete that says what they can and cannot do. So the other thing I thought of was, why do we only have 6-foot walls, fences? Why don't we have, like, you know, along freeways, they put up 8 to 10 foot concrete block walls for noise mitigation? And have we thought of doing something more than just a neighborly 6-foot fence for noise mitigation? So first of all, I'm saying, as a community here, I think this is a poor place to have dogs. Cats have not been a problem. Of course, they don't bark. They don't make that noise that is not the ambient noise that our freeway.
And we do hear
and we hear the freeway from here. But like you said, most of the time it's ambient until the loud motorcycle goes down or the big diesel truck goes down. We don't really need dog barking noise added to what we already have. So those are my comments and my questions.
Thank you, Barbara. Let me just remind anybody that is as an attendee, if you'd like to address the commission or make a comment, please raise your hand in Zoom, or if you're on the phone, if you could do *9 and you will come up as, that will raise your hand and we will recognize you. So if there's anybody who'd like to speak to us at this time, please raise your hands. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Mariah, are you seeing any?
I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Okay.
Well, if we need to, we can always come back to them in case they're having technical difficulties, as always, with this situation. So
sure,
maybe we could, if we have a last minute person that couldn't get on, we can do that. But
okay, well then we will go ahead and close the public comment portion. If we need to, we can reopen it if there's anybody that wasn't able to get in. So we had some letters that came in. Annette, remind me, those do not need to be read in anymore. Is that correct?
Right. So we had a few that came in. There was 3 at the beginning, and then there was another batch that came in this morning that were emailed to you, and they're also posted on the website. So because they're posted on the website, we don't have to read those into the record.
And just so the public knows, I read all those, and our commissioners have received all those comments as well. Maybe we can ask staff and also our applicant regarding the questions that Ms. Warren brought up regarding the conditional use permit, and you know, what is included in that. She asked some very specific questions about things being written down, and that's one of the things that this CUP does. So
exactly, and I think that's the main question: is how is this memorialized? How is this written down? A conditional use permit's not verbal; it is in writing. It essentially is a contract between the city and a land use and a user, and it is a written resolution that's passed, and those conditions that if the council were to, if the planning commission were to approve this tonight, those conditions are in writing. But any other detailed questions, Mariah can weigh in is to that, the breadth of those conditions and what items are in that.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think that some really good points were made. The conditions don't they specifically say that they need to have staff present with the dogs. Dogs can't be left on their own, but we don't have a limit to 2 dogs. So that's something that could certainly be revised, 2 dogs outside at a time in those exterior yards. So the condition can be changed to be more specific. And then we can also add a condition to sort of outline what Wood's operation is as more of a medical facility than a kennel, I guess, to make sure that that's clear to any future occupant. So we can certainly revise and add those conditions. And then just going back to backtrack to the wall, Dennis's question about the wall over the future sewer line there. That Kelly checked in with our public works department, and that's something that we would actually suggest a revision to, just saying that the wall is okay to be there, but if it's ever damaged for repair, maintenance, access, or replacement of that sewer pipe, that the applicant or owner is responsible for repairing that wall. So that's something that staff would like to add to that condition.
You're muted too.
I had another question that I forgot, I overlooked. It had to do with the frontage improvements in the mitigation list under the public works. And it's number 28, and it talks about gates proposed at the driveways. At the front of the property shall be placed a maximum of 20 feet from the edge of pavement, preferably 20 feet setback from city right of way, and should open inwards. Does our fire department have a standard for how far they want the gates off the, I would say the right of way, not the edge of pavement, so that their equipment doesn't queue up out with their butts out in the street in Ramona Road? Is 20 feet enough for that type of use?
So I'm not familiar with the fire department standards. I know that the public works department requires that 20 feet so vehicles aren't sticking out into the right of way. But I've never heard the fire department weigh in or have any issues. I don't know. They're the fire department, so I think, it's less likely for them to be having that issue. And if they do, people are going to go around them.
Typically, the fire department would review any engineering standards to make sure that they met their standards as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that could then, under the condition that the staff can modify mitigations at a certain percentage, then if the fire department says we want 30 feet, then that could be changed at that point.
Yeah, we've had questions about gates. It's a fairly common question, and the standard is always 20 feet. So I'm assuming that meets the fire standards, but I don't know. Phil, have you ever heard specifically fire talk about that?
No, it's usually those are designed for the regular vehicle size, so they can pull off the street before a gate opens. So that wouldn't be the case for a fire truck. If there's a fire on this property, they're going to park in the right of way, or they're going to barrel right through a gate if it's there. if it's an emergency. So that has not been a restriction. But just as a safeguard, each one of these projects, if it comes to construction, if this comes to fruition, is going to go through a very detailed code plan check with both the fire division, the building division, the public works division, and they have to carefully evaluate all of those things, regardless of how it's shown on this particular site plan.
I know for a fact that not our city, but CAL FIRE has a 30-foot requirement. And in our particular situation with our city, our fire department probably makes more healthcare calls than they do fire calls. So for instance, like where I live near the Atascadero Christian home, they drive down the street, maybe 10, 12 times a week, responding to elders falling over and doing things there. So there's fire trucks are used for that type of use. And so if something happens when someone gets hurt or whatever, then that fire truck is going to show up, not a smaller vehicle, because again, that's how the use is within the city. So I just want to make sure that it be addressed if need to be. So thank you.
Mariah, that brings up a question that I have regarding the fence. For operationally, will the gates be open during operating hours, just be closed at night? Or?
Yes, that's my understanding. There are 2 gates. I'm trying to share my screen again. Let me see if I can pull up a site plan. So yeah, the gate, well, yeah, it says actually right here, security gate would remain open during operating hours. And then I believe there's another gate here, and then this is more designated as staff parking. And oh, here, it would be here. And then this is staff parking back here. But this would be open during operating hours.
And the gate on the exit, that would be open also?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for staff regarding these issues? Okay. Any discussion between commissioners? Yeah, Dennis.
I just want to say that from the testimony that was provided by Woods, on behalf of Woods, by the professionals that they've hired, it really appears that Woods is attuned to the concerns of the neighbors in this area, and for all projects that they seem to be involved with. I was quite impressed with the discussion about dogs bark when they are stressed, and the attention that's being put within the facility itself to reduce stress for the animals, I think, is incredibly important, and I'm very much impressed with that.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to visit the Woods facility in San Luis Obispo, and that was a very state-of-the-art kind of facility where they had a lot of volunteers, a lot of people working with the animals. I was there for over an hour, and I don't know if I ever even heard a dog barking the whole time I was there, mostly because they have people that are with them and interacting with them and kind of controlling that. So I think that the noise is going to be a lot less than the neighbors are worried about. But there are some mitigations or some measures that will be available in the CUP. So if there is a problem, then there's a method for taking care of that. Now, Mariah, or maybe Phil, one of the questions that Barbara brought up is tall walls. I just wanted one of you to maybe address why the city wouldn't put in tall walls instead of just 6-foot walls.
Well, typically you consider 2 things. You consider your noise source, and you consider the aesthetics of the neighborhood and the need for a wall. Typically, if we're trying to screen a noise source, we think about where the noise source is coming from. In this case, it would be coming from a dog, And most dogs are off the ground at about 1 to 2 feet. If your noise source was up higher, we would consider a higher barrier, but also a lot of other things to consider aesthetically and construction wise from a wall or fence. Throughout our city, our fence heights are limited to between 6 and 7 feet based on the type and design of fence, and a lot of areas to 4 feet. And it's to preserve view sheds and solar access and aesthetics. And a wall that's over 6 foot or 7 foot becomes a very, very large building object. And also then you increase your chances for graffiti tagging and all these other things. And it becomes a big aesthetic barrier. And if we were looking to block something aesthetically or block a noise source that was substantial, such as freeway noise, and freeway noise is substantial, you've got big trucks that sit 6, 7, 8 feet off the ground and those kinds of things. And that's where you do a taller wall. So staff is not really in support of anything taller than that, primarily because it's not really necessary, but also it creates other impacts that would need to be evaluated.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that. Jason?
I just wanted to comment that I believe that the way this facility was put together is very well thought out, with this type of situation being, handled many, many times over. And I've been in kennels, where dogs are just dropped off and they're just barking all over the place. And I've been in vets, which tend to be much quieter. And I believe that the way this facility is run is at the highest bar. And so I don't foresee a lot of noise escaping the building because it's built so well. My main concern was, if they were gonna have a bunch of dogs out at the same time barking all day. It doesn't seem like that. It seems like it's going to be the occasional dog out meeting a prospective owner, or them walking the dog or taking him out for some exercise, like you would normally have in a neighborhood. You can't necessarily be upset that you're in a quiet neighborhood and your friend has a dog and he's out, walking him, and the dog's barking a few times. So I think that it's not going to raise the overall noise level in the neighborhood beyond what you would normally consider normal neighborhood noise. If anybody has any disagreement with that, I'd like to hear it.
I 100% agree with you. And it's really nice that they actually did research in how much decibels the internal walls would filter. I mean, if anything, they're making things better at this location. They're providing a public good. If the animals aren't there, they're somewhere else. If, we don't have those public resources, those animals are on the streets. So I have the same exact concerns, and it looks like they've kind of really been inclusive to the outer neighborhood is their concern. And if they're not, and they get complaints, they risk complications that could, it's conditional.
I don't think, when it comes to Woods, they're going to be attuned to everything that happens. They seem to, at this point, in terms of the operational standards that they have set up, it's to their behalf to take care of issues if they do show up. So I don't see them being lax at all with respect to anything that could occur on the property.
Yeah, and from what I could see on the pictures, it looks like the top of the building, even where they have like their parapet at, where they have their mechanical, it looks like that's where, if they have heater units or whatnot, or AC units, it looks like they've already even thought about that. They've thought about walls around it and making sure that it's to where it's not visually. And to be honest, who's going to see that aside from someone with a drone? They really, really want pretty considerate here.
Yeah, no, I was impressed last week when I was at the San Luis facility, and the amount of attention they put into mitigating noise within the building. They had pictures of dogs up on the walls, and they made sure to point out that those pictures were actually acoustic tiles that had the dog's pictures printed on them. So they put a lot of measures in there. They had a wall separating the kennels so the dogs looking across the room couldn't see each other to help mitigate their stress. And then they had plants and things along the top of that wall, which also help absorb noise. So they put a lot of thought into noise inside the building not being able to escape. And I was pretty impressed with that, and pretty impressed with their facility.
Oh, would somebody like to make a motion here?
I'll make the motion.
Hey, Jason.
And I'd like to see if anybody would like to add anything to this motion before I make it, just so that everybody's had their time to speak. No? Okay. Did somebody want to put the motion up?
And Brian, can you put the,
I'm on mute. I don't think I have a specific slide with the motion.
Page 16.
That's okay. I got it. Okay. It's easier to see on my screen. All right. Make the motion to adopt the resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Atascadero approving the conditional use permit use 22-0027, allowing the expansion of existing animal shelter and spay and neuter facility, APN number 049-141-043.
I'll second.
Good.
And I just want to ask if your motion includes any conditions about limiting the number of dogs, specifying the conditions about Woods specific operations, and then staff is requesting to revise that wall condition.
Yes, go ahead and add the staff's recommendation to revise the wall condition. And as far as limiting their ability to conduct their business, I'm not really at liberty to say it's their business and they seem to know what they're doing better than I do. I don't think you can put a conditional use permit or a conditional on there to say if well, I don't even know how to put it.
I think it best to leave it open at this point, and then if there is an issue, then staff could limit the amount of activity in the future and use that. But let's see what happens and then allow for that to come up. And that might be the first action staff takes.
I would like to second this.
Yeah,
we have can we get a roll call on this item, please?
Sure. Okay. Commissioner Anderson,
yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Chairperson Van den Eyck.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you, and congratulations to Woods. They have a long road. Sounds like they still have a long road to hoe ahead of them before they could even submit for permits, but wish them all the best. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and have a director's report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the big topic that's upcoming is a review of Senate Bill 9 and accessory dwelling units policies for the city of Atascadero. Right now, we're working with our legal team to do some zoning code updates that accommodate these changes to state law. We hope to get those to you in your next hearing, but it might get delayed as we go through our legal review process. We need to make sure that everything is going to work. So there'll be a number of changes to address those topics. It's kind of been an interesting ride going through these and evaluating these. A lot of work ahead of us, a lot of changes associated with it. And the accessory dwelling unit law is going to create a couple separate ordinances that we'll have to look at. And SB 9 will look at that separately as well. And these new policies will essentially dictate what the state is requiring our city to do. But again, we have some local objective design standards. We have some local standards for Senate Bill 9 for health and safety. And we'll be evaluating these code updates that are necessary. Right now, we're operating off what we'll call interim ordinances for these things. And these new ordinances will replace those and they'll become permanent. In terms of the accessory dwelling unit policies that we adopt, that is also something that will move on to state housing community development for their review as well. They'll need to endorse that following our city council review. So that'll be interesting. We'll be doing that very soon. That's the major project we're working on right now. in addition to the fact that we're kickstarting our general plan update, and we'll bring more information to you on that as well. I keep alluding to that. But just an FYI for anybody that is working on properties that are doing SB9 lot splits or SB9 designs or ADUs, definitely want to think about participating in the next hearing if you have active projects that you're working with on those, whether you're, well, several of you are involved with the profession, whether you're realtors or engineers or architects. So this is something to be aware of as we go through both of those code updates. So anyway, other stuff happening in the community, a lot of the development review projects will also be bringing to you the marketplace project with the Del Rio site. That's the location. It's got the proposed Valley Fresh. That's moving forward. We'll likely get that to you soon as well. That's about it. Be happy to answer your questions about other stuff happening in the community.
Yes.
Dennis?
Yeah, I kind of carry on SB9. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot is more of a mechanical thing. When you're finalizing a map and you have your certificate sheet, there are statements that are on there by the city council and by the city development director. And those are kind of designed for a non-ministerial act, a discretionary act. And so I'm kind of wondering if we need to look at some of the statements that we put on map faces to address SB9.
That's a good comment. We probably do. This is all new for us. So I think we're seeing some of our first maps now, and we definitely need to take a close look at that language on the recordation documents. And I think we're working on modifying some of those right now as well.
Any other questions for Phil? Do we have anything for, oh, go ahead.
Real quick, Phil, do you wake up in the middle of the night yelling, SB9, SB9, SB9?
It's kind of a nightmare, actually. It's more like, state takeover, help.
The state is coming.
Yeah.
The state is coming.
Yeah, taking over our zoning. How can we take it back? No.
Yeah.
Not going to be used that much.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Phil. Do we have anything on our next meeting agenda yet?
So that would be the topic of our next meeting agenda if we're able to finalize everything as we'd like.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, we'll go ahead and adjourn until possibly May 17th, our next scheduled meeting.
Thank you.
Everybody.